Now, hours after his talks with Vladimir Putin, the American President Donald Trump has reportedly told the European leaders that the Russian president is not ready to end the war with Ukraine. Now, the Wall Street Journal reports, citing three people familiar with the conversation, where the American president said that Putin is unwilling to pursue peace because he's convinced that he's winning the war against Ukraine on the ground. Now, this marks the very first time that Donald Trump has confirmed it directly to European leaders, who have long believed that the Russian leader is not interested in peace. Now, the US president's remarks, however, have contradicted his usual public stance, in which he has been claiming that Putin is keen on ending the conflict. Now, according to the report, Trump's stance on Putin has shifted noticeably between his two calls with the European leaders before and after his discussion with the Russian president. On Sunday, the day before his 2-hour-long call with Putin, Trump had suggested that he might consider imposing sanctions if Putin rejects a ceasefire. A day later, Trump changed his course, proposing the talks between the Russians and the Ukrainians at the Vatican and then pushing for sanctions. The Monday call involved the Ukrainian President Zelensky, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and also the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Now, following his conversation with Putin, Trump had told the reporters that this is not his fight and that the United States had got dragged into a conflict and it shouldn't be involved in. Meanwhile, Russia on Wednesday dismissed claims from Ukraine and the European officials that it was intentionally stalling the peace process, saying that it plans to name its conditions for a ceasefire but has declined to give a time frame. Now, after his call with Trump, Putin had said that Russia will present its ideas of a memorandum on possible steps for peace to Kiev. When asked about when the memorandum can be expected, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that nobody is interested in dragging out this process.
Работа ведется во исполнении тех договоренностей, которые были достигнуты в Стамбуле. Никто не заинтересован в том, чтобы затягивать процесс. Работают все динамично. Мы будем вас информировать. Разумеется, большая часть этой работы ведется в дискретном режиме, и она не должна по понятным причинам быть открыта публике.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin has said that Putin visited the border region of Kursk, his first to the area since it was fully recaptured from the Ukrainian forces. Now, Putin rarely visits areas near the front lines, and his movement to the border regions are often kept under wraps until after he has returned. And during the visit on Tuesday, Putin met with the region's governor and spoke with the local volunteers and inspected the site of a multi-billion-dollar nuclear power plant that is still under construction. Meanwhile, air traffic around Moscow was disrupted as the Russian capital came under attack from the Ukrainian drones, with Russian Defense Ministry saying that 35 Ukrainian drones targeting the city had been downed overnight. According to the ministry, the air defenses destroyed and also intercepted a total of 105 Ukrainian drones, of which 35 were headed towards Moscow. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening in these negotiations for peace in Ukraine, we are joined on this broadcast by Mr. Maximilian Hess. He's joining us from London. He's a Central Asia Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and also author of Economic War, Ukraine and the Global Conflict Between Russia and the West. Mr. Hess, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us here on this broadcast and beyond. Let me ask you this. Right from his campaigning days, Donald Trump had been saying that he can bring about peace within a day since he assumes charge. But what do you think has changed now that Donald Trump, for the very first time, is publicly saying that Russia perhaps is not interested in negotiating for peace because it believes that it is winning the war on the ground?
Firstly, thank you very much for having me. I'm not so sure that anything has fundamentally changed other than Donald Trump is realizing that the prospects for him having a quick victory in terms of being able to gain concessions from Vladimir Putin is no longer something that he hopes for. I don't think that Donald Trump has meaningfully changed his opinion and strong admiration for Vladimir Putin or his animosity towards the Ukrainian president. We will see increased domestic pressures in the U.S. for additional action against Russia, but frankly, this is a topic that Trump wishes he wasn't dealing with, as it's not a so-called winner for him. That's why we see him change his mind in these sort of off-the-cuff statements and refuse to take any action.
You know, Donald Trump in the past has said that this is not America's war, even though it is the Americans who have been backing the Ukrainian war effort to the hilt. But the fact that now Trump is willing to admit that the Russian president is perhaps not willing to negotiate for peace, do you think it will now change Donald Trump's approach to this entire war in Ukraine?
Well, Donald Trump certainly is unique in the modern history of American presidents, is that he doesn't view European security as core to the U.S. national interest, nor do a number of members of his administration. However, a number of leading lights in the Republican Party, in particular in Congress, still very much believe in that position. Certainly, I would be of the opinion that European security and global security, which Russia presents the foremost and overwhelming threat to, is in the U.S.'s national interest as well. As to whether Donald Trump is ultimately going to change that view, I think that it is highly unlikely that fundamentally he changes that view, but I do think there are key ways that the European Union, the UK, the wider Western alliance can work together to ensure continued American support. We will see that in more pledges of European funding to go to buy U.S. ammunition and armaments to continue to support Ukraine, something that, by the way, the Europeans have been doing since Russia's full-scale invasion began, but which they will change some of the language around and cast as a new agreement in some ways so that Donald Trump can claim it as a victory. He cares about headline wins, not the details, and European leaders are figuring that out.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Maximilian Hess, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.